Okay, yeah, we are delaying, so hopefully like 3 more people will show up. Nice. Get started. Cool.
Were you told how long for the delay?
No, Alfie just said wait until he gets here. So I think he's going to bring some people. But until then, how's everyone doing? Good? Tired? Exhausted? Overwhelmed?
Kick off. Are you guys all set up? Do you need any support?
No, but Alfie said to wait for him.
Oh, he's on that thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
It's a cozy one. You guys can come closer if you want. Don't bite, I promise.
Come on. It's late in the day, but let's get more.
The big angry pig might bite you though.
Let's just sit around the tables. I mean, we were trying to keep this space a little bit more, I don't know, broken down, collaborative, chatty, but there were so many people showing up that we had to put in the theater. Now this is not the case. So let's just get in there.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, exactly. Something for me to like follow a bit more now.
Should we do a quick calibration of the room? Scientists? Web3, any sort of developers of technology or software? Oh, and what are you guys?
Scientist.
Oh, okay, so you're just not paying attention. And you guys?
IP was a scientist.
Okay, got it. Low. Okay, so community ecosystem, venture capital. Yeah. Cool. So should I go find Alfie then? So we, or do you want to just do a bit of
That's
intro?
in there. He's coming. Yeah, favorite talk of the day?
Okay. Are we going to start?
Yeah.
No chickens?
Hypersets for me.
Which one?
Hypersets one.
Oh, I must have missed that one.
I saw you actually. You just left. It was just
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay, well, this did wonders for my stage fright. So, hello everyone. This will be a more cozy talk. But yeah, so the title of the talk, Saving Our Bacon. Synthetic biology saves the day. Just out of interest, how many people know what synthetic biology is? Oh, vast majority. So yeah, I will try not to spend too much time on the oversimplification. But just to go through a quick checklist of the things I'm going to be covering. What is synthetic biology? Why will it save our bacon, as in this thing? And then why will it save our bacon, quite literally? And then why should we decentralize it? Which obviously is the theme of this entire conference. And I'm going to try not to bore you with too much on the principles of decentralization, but it is very relevant to the principles and the philosophies of synthetic biology as a discipline. And then what is ValleyDAO doing to support this? So another quick gauge, who's heard of ValleyDAO or is aware of what they do? Okay, a few people, 50-50. Right, cool. Well, yeah, just give myself a little bit of background. I did a bachelor's in microbiology at the University of Liverpool. And then I went on to do a MRes in systems and synthetic biology at Imperial College London. It really was a clear path for me once I did micro that systems and synthetic biology was going to change the world. And that's what I'm here to get you excited about today. So we live in one giant biological system. I'm sure as scientists, many of you may have noticed that. But kind of the reason why I'm interested in decentralization is studying natural systems. So things like ant colonies, beehives, they're all systems based. These individual entities, the individual insects can do quite little on their own, but with these rules of interaction, they're able to generate these super intelligences and solve problems that are far greater than their own individual capacity. Systems are robust. They're, especially in the planet, everything is recycled. And if they're working correctly, they're not zero sum. So that means you apply pressure into one area, you're going to see a rebalancing and a refinding of that equilibrium. But as humans have been tinkering with that balance and pushing it in our favor, then we have really started to take from the environment. So I'm here to talk about why we can change our relationship with that. Just quickly, to give you a background as well, again, not to oversimplify, but the circle of life, right? Nothing on the planet is permanent, and you'll see that in nature all the time. But what we essentially have is a planet of finite resources. And for billions of years, life has been constantly recycling, creating new things, new iterations, and just generally evolving into these adaptive biologies that can do really interesting and complicated things. But as I said, nothing is permanent. Everything that grows eventually dies or diminishes. And that is part of, or what I believe, part of the beauty of nature. So on the slide before, I showed this, has the yin and yang. I actually have it on my arm. But that's because I very deeply believe in this philosophy of this circular economy and how everything must be in balance with both the positive and negative. So in contrast to ValleyDAO, I see death as a natural part of life and part of the reason why we should enjoy it and celebrate it. So what is synthetic biology? Well, it's a subset of biotechnology that applies to the tools, the techniques and methodologies that enable us to better engineer and tinker with biological systems. And really it's about changing our relationship with nature in such a way that we're no longer just studying and observing biology, but we're actually able to tailor it and make it do things that we want it to do. So one of the really kind of core philosophies of synthetic biology is improving the design, build, test, learn cycle for bio-based innovation. So there's different components to all of these, and within each of those components, there's lots of areas for accelerating the overall wheel. So if you think of each of these stages as gears, well, how can we make the overall cycle turn faster? Well, we make those individual gears shorter. So at every stage, there's opportunity, especially at the amazing time we're at in the planet. There's opportunity for innovation. And there's opportunity to apply some of these amazing technologies we've developed to innovate and really build a new industry. So we can improve the design and build gear by computation, automation, and molecular biology techniques. Now, I know there's a lot of SynBio people or people that know SynBio in the room, so I'm not going to bore you with what molecular biology techniques are. But really, I just wanted to demonstrate kind of the principles to apply in order to accelerate innovation. And then again, we can shorten the gears of test and learn by using artificial intelligence and machine learning, automation, bioassays, and computer simulations. So we can actually now simulate a lot of the things that would have taken us weeks or potentially months or years in a wet lab so in silico. So we can simulate them on a computer. We can iterate much faster. We can make that open source, things like GitHub, where people can build on top of and develop quite rapidly and essentially lead us to more and new exciting discoveries. So that's all cool, but what can we actually do with it? Like, why should we be doing these things with synthetic biology? Well, I'm here to tell you that the possibilities are absolutely endless. And honestly, it never ceases to amaze me how much we can do. Just applying these whole principles of engineering biology to accelerating bioinnovation. One of the really kind of amazing and again core philosophies of synthetic biology is standardization. So how do we make something that's inherently noisy and complicated into something that we can predict and reliably design for? And that's a really complicated problem, and there's a lot of really bright and talented minds working on exactly that. But as I said, the true power of synthetic biology is what can we apply it to? And that's what I get really excited about. So the first and kind of major example that we've been quite familiar with is healthcare and medicine. So things like gene therapies, the COVID-19 vaccine, I'm sure many of you have had it, was developed using a lot of the synthetic biology techniques that have been researched in labs for many, many years. The only reason we were able to so rapidly deploy a vaccine worldwide was because we had established these foundations for designing new and editable vaccines. So this really demonstrates the power of standardization and developing things that are modular, we can rapidly build on top of, and again, accelerating that design, build, test, and learn cycle. But then a couple of the other more hypothetical ones, or things that people are working towards, personalized medicines. So everyone knows in medicine by now that one glove does not fit all. A pill that works for me is not necessarily a pill that works for you. And so we can really start to factor in people's genetic histories, their genders, their BMIs, and all of these different factors in order to give them personalized medicines that will help them and are going to decrease the risk of side effects. And then finally, something that I think is really cool, and I really hope to see this one day, is adaptive medicine. Now, it's something that's a bit science fiction, but it's definitely within the realms of possibility that we could have a medicine that does not only treat a symptom, so say, for example, a cancer therapy, but we could actually give someone a therapy that is learning and evolving with the cancer. So, you think about cancer as something that learns and evolves also, and that's why we get so much recurrence of cancer symptoms, and it's a very difficult disease to treat. Well, if we could have something that we could put in place that knows the principles, basically the rules of the game that cancer is trying to play, then we might have a better chance at solving some of those problems. But the future of biology is definitely not healthcare. So it's where a lot of the investment and energy has gone into at the moment. Big pharma, everyone's heard of. But that's not where the true power is. It's actually in agriculture, food, materials, and energy. And you can see from this graph here that if you add all of those together, it far outweighs the opportunity in healthcare. Now, so by 2030, the estimated annual economic impact of synthetic biology and biotechnology is 3.4 trillion. So we're not talking about we are talking about an emerging field, but we're talking about massive amounts of capital and opportunity. And then finally, overall investment in synthetic biology has been on the up. So pretty much every year since 2016, it's been doubling, and that doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon, despite all of the troubles we're having with our economy, which I won't go into. So yeah, why is this relevant for the climate? If you take a look at our current Anthropocene, well, it's extractive, it's dominant, human-centric, and it's excessive. So we've really been, as I said, toying with the balance of nature in our favor. We've been extracting things, not really considering the consequences and the long-term impact of what we're doing. And now we're definitely at an age where I'd say the vast majority of people can agree that we're doing something really horribly wrong, and we really can't continue to move in the way that we have been. But what could a phase 2 Anthropocene look like? Well, with synthetic biology, it could be one that's symbiotic, one that's circular, and as I mentioned, impermanent. So really designing things not to last 1,000 or 1,000,000 years, but things that we know are eventually going to break down and degrade, and that we can recycle and turn into new things. So, for example, biodegradable plastics, we can design bacteria that can digest those and turn it into fuel. So then we no longer have the problem of generating huge amounts of waste that we have to put somewhere or dispose of. We're actually creating systems that are self-sustaining and closing the loop of the bioeconomy. And then one that's geocentric. And what I mean by that is one where we're actually thinking about the long-term health and benefit of the planet, because ultimately the planet is what sustains us as civilizations. So the UN has stated this is the goal for 2030 in order to mitigate the climate impact, and that's just limit it to 1.5 degrees warming as opposed to 2. So that's 1.75 trillion per year by 2030. And just to have a look at our current progress on that, And this is 2019 and 2020, so it's a little bit outdated, but that's just 525 billion pounds. So it's less than a third of the way towards those targets. And, you know, by this current rate, we won't even reach that target by 2030, let alone be doing it every single year. Just to show you some of the consequences, although I'm sure you're all aware of climate change and the climate impact. So these are satellite images from NASA, and this is the Indus River in Pakistan. And after massive flooding, what you can see there's just a dramatic change in the landscape. Now imagine there's villages and people that are relying on this land. Where do they go? But the opposite is also true. So this is the Prieto Reservoir in Mexico, completely dried up. And now, again, imagine people depending on these water resources to sustain themselves, their agriculture, their washing in many cases. Climate change is essentially pushing us to both extremes, and we really need to do something about that. But I'm not an alarmist, and I think we need a balanced approach. So whatever kind of side of the fence you sit on, I think there's benefit to, you know, pushing people to really be motivated, showing them the drastic impact that this could have on our societies. But there's also benefit in the optimism and really empowering people to think that we can build a better future, because I do wholeheartedly believe that. But it's, you know, synthetic biology kind of takes some middle ground on that. It's using realism. So what is broken, what can we fix, and what can we do better? And these are kind of three main things that I think synthetic biology can do. So protect, process, and provide. So essentially, we can protect ourselves by generating more robust systems. So things like engineered crops that might be more resistant to drought, might be more resistant to pests or fungal pathogens. But we can also process things. So as I mentioned earlier, we can turn plastics into new materials. We can turn food waste and agricultural waste into fuels and chemicals, and then provide. So that kind of is, again, closing the loop and providing a lot of the things we know and love as civilizations in a way that's sustainable and not harmful to the environment. So how does it actually work? Well, it's inspired by nature. And we use a lot of the, as I said, technologies and techniques using, for example, bioinformatics and computational biology to better design and program cells and systems, as well as simulating them so we can reliably predict the outcomes. And then there's obviously scale up. And this is the real crux of the problem in synthetic biology. And this is something ValleyDAO is especially interested in addressing. But imagine a society where we can take greenhouse gases and turn them into sustaining the population. Again, by producing fuels, chemicals, materials, medicines. And so you have this kind of bipolar or two sides of the coin, essentially, where you're both cleaning up our act and also sustaining us as a civilization. So it just puts us in a much stronger position. So these are some of the different verticals that synthetic biology can address. I won't spend too long on these. I'm sure you've heard of many of them. And this is not an exhaustive list, so the possibilities really are very, very wide. And then, yeah, I just want to show you a few really cool examples that I came across. So this is modern Meadow. They're producing synthetic, but not really synthetic leather. So not that horrible plasticky stuff, but they're using essentially the biosynthetic pathway of collagen and engineering it into yeast so that they can grow this in a bioreactor and produce synthetic leather. Another really cool one is what Genesis Bioindustries are doing, which is turning food waste into biodegradable plastic. So again, we've got this food waste turning into a revenue stream, but also producing plastic, which is biodegradable, so impermanent and nicely fits into this circular economy vision. And then finally, another really cool example is methane that we can turn into fish food. So this is a company called Kinva, and they are extracting methane from the atmosphere, but also from kind of agriculture and turning it into fish food for aquaculture. And, you know, you might think, okay, fish food, cool, but aquaculture is a massive, massive industry that's both sustaining human populations, but it's also sustaining our agriculture and generating feeds for other things as well. And this is a really shocking example of the kind of climate impact of our human activities. So who likes meat here? Hands, show of hands. Yeah, like 50-50. But you know, I really like meat, but this is just not acceptable. 50 kilograms per 3.5 ounce of beef patty. And now I promised I'd tell you how we could save our bacon. So this is the greenhouse gas impact of bacon. It's a lot less than beef, but it's still very drastic. So 7 times essentially its own weight in greenhouse gas impact. But what we can do with SynBio is we can generate these products animal-free. So we're no longer having to keep an animal alive for months and months. It's not eating and pooing and releasing all nasty stuff into the atmosphere that we have to clean up. Instead, we can do it in a lab, in a sterile environment that's very predictable and controlled. Now, that doesn't sound that appealing to eat, but if you have the money at the moment, because they're quite expensive, I implore you to go out and try some of these SynBio meat alternatives. And finally, I just wanted to tell you about the circular economy. So I know I've kind of name dropped it a few times, but really it represents the drastic way we can reform our civilizations and sustain ourselves. So no longer producing things that are going to imbalance this biological system we live in, but we can close that loop and really have a symbiotic relationship with the planet. But what if trash becomes treasure? I mean, waste is very incorporated into our language, but what if our food waste, our plastic waste, our respiratory waste becomes a revenue stream? Then can we even call it waste anymore? So this is just kind of an interesting way that I think about synthetic biology, not only changing our relationship with the environment, but also changing the language we use. So kind of what are the problems in science and academia that are leading us to want to decentralize? Now, I'm not going to spend too long on these. I know we've all exhausted conversations around all of these. But yeah, it's clear that the systems need change, and it's not conducive to kind of collaborative innovation. So we really want to move from something that is against competition and in favor of collaboration and cooperation. And that's all about changing our incentives. So how does ValleyDAO actually propose to solve some of these problems? Well, the first and foremost, and arguably the most powerful thing, is the DAO itself. So the DAO that we formed is essentially a community of people with diverse experience and backgrounds across a wide range of sectors. And we've lowered the barriers of entry for them to contribute. So we've got bubbles that can contribute on specific projects, but we've got also people that can help with the commercialization, the marketing, the philosophical debate, the ethics, and then obviously on the financial side as well. We also have the governance token. So in April, early April, we are planning to launch the Grow token, which will be ValleyDAO's governance token. So essentially it allows you to own, collectively own part of this synthetic biology future and dictate where it goes next. So you'll be able to vote on things such as which research projects do we fund, but also vote on things like, who is leading a certain initiative, or who is helping to, who do we collaborate with, or who gets the license to a particular piece of technology. And then IP NFTs. So I'm sure you've heard Molecule talk about them. And obviously we just had a talk on decentralization of IP. But we see it as a really powerful tool for increasing the liquidity of IP as an asset class. And basically, again, being a pillar of facilitating a more collaborative and cooperative ecosystem that's generating more innovation and ultimately more value and stability to the human race. So this is a snapshot of our community at present. This is by no means not everyone. We actually have over 500 members in our Discord at the moment. But these are some of our core contributors. And I guess the power of the DAO is really facilitating connections that wouldn't have otherwise occurred. When you've got people that specialize in sectors like synthetic biology, then you end up with convergent groups of people that are experts in synthetic biology and might not see the world in the way that some of the other people might see it. And it's important that all of these people are, self-motivated. They're stakeholders in the technology because they're ultimately going to benefit from the climate impact. And every single one of them has expressed a desire to contribute, not with the vision of financial compensation, but rather the vision of creating and building a better future. So by facilitating all of these connections, we can really create a vibrant ecosystem that is generating some really exciting research. So this is kind of how we actually generate revenue and value from a financial point of view. Now, I won't break it down too granularly, but essentially we break it down into finding, funding, and translating research. So with the ValleyDAO community, obviously we've got a wide network of people both within and outside of synthetic biology, and they are able to leverage their networks to find exciting projects, find people that might want to pioneer the next movement towards climate biotechnology. And then we're able to fund those research projects. And that's really where the token is going to come into play. And now, once we fund those projects, we basically negotiate a deal to generate IP. And eventually, if the IP is generated and the technology is translated, any revenues will be funneled back into the DAO, of course, compensating those other contributors that have been a part of that process too. So again, including this in a Web3 decentralized way allows us to do that in, again, a trustless way. So rather than having to chase up people and say, oh, you use my technology, where's my cut? Instead, we can code all of this stuff into smart contracts so that as soon as someone clicks purchase on the licensing marketplace, those stakeholders are automatically compensated for their contributions. And then the hope is that we generate essentially a flywheel of innovation. So by channeling some of those proceeds and equity back into the ValleyDAO treasury, we can then decide to fund new and exciting research. So how do we actually capture value, and what's our thesis for investment? Well, it's investing in horizontal technologies. And these are things that would typically be quite monopolizable. And essentially, these are why they're the first targets for ValleyDAO as a DAO. You've got all these different horizontals, and these are things like cell lines, cell-free extracts, genetic engineering methods, things that everybody is going to use at some point in their SynBio pipeline. But then you've also got the different verticals. So all of these horizontals can apply to all of these different areas. And again, I haven't included all examples, but you can see the financial opportunity of each of these markets is huge. And if we're investing in things that are both horizontal and vertical, then the total addressable market is enormous. And important to note, we only, if we invested in 10 projects, we would only need one of those to become a unicorn to, really substantially generate revenues and be able to fund more and more research. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about our other kind of unexpected, but really powerful application of our community. So we've been able to basically form a venture studio and incubate different research projects. So one example is we've had researchers come to us and they lack a lot of the soft skills or sometimes even the motivation to translate that technology. Again, I think it's to do with the incentive system, but they're quite happy for us to come on, and if we can give them a pathway to translation of their research, then they will give us an equity stake in those spin-outs and companies. So that's just another way that ValleyDAO can capture some of that value and then refunnel it into new and exciting research for the future. So if I've done my job correctly, you're really excited about SynBio now, and you'd love to get involved. So this is how you can do so. Our Discord is completely open. And as I say, you just want to land there. You'll see kind of different pages and tabs. The main one is intro yourself, just say hi, and one of us will be in touch and we'll be happy to kind of take a call. But if you are a researcher and you're working on something that's really exciting that you'd like to get translated, then you can also get in touch with us on our email, which is research@valleydao.bio. But if you go to our website also, you will find our research application form. So if you're not keen on having an extended conversation with us and you just want to submit a proposal, you can do that. It's really quick and easy to submit, as you may have seen with VitaDAO's application process. It's nothing like a grant proposal, and we're really quickly and efficiently able to communicate with the researchers to find a exciting outcome for everyone. But yeah, the other alternative is just come say hi. Hopefully you know my face by now. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Any questions? No questions?
I can ask a question.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
So I'm wondering so far, I don't know how many projects you have, but how successful have you been in negotiating things with university tech transfer offices? Because I imagined that if I would want to do something as part of a ValleyDAO and I would go to my tech transfer office and start to talk to them about smart contracts and governance, they would think I'm crazy, probably.
No, absolutely, and it's a great question. And this is something, you know, when you're doing something that's drastically different, there's going to be pushback, there's going to be resistance. But fortunately, we have a really awesome dedicated team, one of which is Dan Hussey. So he actually works at the tech transfer office in Texas, Houston. And so he knows, you know, the ins and outs and the incentives that are driving these different people. And we're really able to negotiate a deal that is beneficial for both the tech transfer office and the institution, but also the researchers and ValleyDAO as a community too. I think ultimately it just comes down to the value we can provide. If we can say to the tech transfer office that are usually completely oversubscribed and underpaid, that we can actually translate their work more effectively and more efficiently, but still give them financial compensation for that, then a lot of them are actually quite open to it. And then finally, you know, when we're offering to completely fund a research project, then it's hard to turn that down if you're a researcher.
Yeah, I had a quick question as well. If you go back to your slide on, I think ValleyDAO applied, where you describe the cycle from finding, funding, and translating. How theoretical is this at this point, and have you actually built some track record on any of the steps?
Yeah, great question. So it's not just theory. We are actually already at the translate process, or sorry, the funding and negotiating the translation process. So we do have two research projects that we've got through to negotiations, and we're waiting for, you know, those final signatures and the funding to give the go ahead. Now, that is part of our strategy this year, is doing our community token launch. So we'll be allocating a certain percentage of our total token supply in order to raise funds to fund these research projects that we've already done extended due diligence on. Just to highlight those projects, one of them is with Imperial College London and is on improving lipid biosynthesis in yeast. And again, this is a very horizontal and vertical technology because it's something that could generate, you know, palm oils, cosmetics, biofuels. And then another really cool project we've got is biofluorination. So something that really uses intensive chemicals, high heat and pressure, and is definitely no good for the environment, but is very widely applied into a variety of products, especially consumer products, is fluorination. So, you know, there's Denmark Technical University have come up with a way to do that in a more sustainable bio-fueled way. Yes, please.
Is that tokenomics paper written, or are you guys set on it, or are you still working out the kinks?
Yeah, no, great question. So we have written it up internally. We are yet to publish that publicly because there's a few minor tweaks that we made. So we changed our strategy in mid-December. So we're still working very hard on getting all of that publicly available. But as we have not that much time until launch, we'll be working around the clock to make sure that everyone's in the know.
I have a weird question. So you've talked about investment in the space doubling year over year, and you showed us a number of really cool companies. Are there commercially successful investments in that space, this space, that are the good guys? Because like all of this is great, but in the back of my head, it's like, oh man, Monsanto rules this space, and it does it by specifically breaking a cyclical economy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is one of the ways that, you know, applying the DAO philosophy, and everyone in the DAO is kind of aligned on this core philosophy that we have, that we want to improve our relationship with nature. I think to do this outside of a DAO that's built on those beliefs is risky, you know, and this is why you see some of these nefarious actors and players in the space. Because there is no kind of regulation. Of course, governments are inclined to do things that are, well, actually. That's debatable. But they're inclined to do things that are more ethical because they're held accountable, whereas companies are not so much. And I think one of the major problems in the climate biotech space is, putting this shiny label on everything that is bio-produced and saying, look how sustainable and green we are, when actually you crunch some of the numbers. And that is not the case. Many of them are carbon positive. So one of the kind of last things that I'd really like to see for ValleyDAO is applying a carbon accounting and really holding these technologies accountable. I think, ValleyDAO being the funder and translator really puts us in a unique position to dictate where these technologies are used and applied. And doing that in a community fashion at least increases or lowers the risk of negative outcomes, I believe.